Hello everyone and welcome to A Pleb's Perspective Part 2. This time we're going to go ahead and discuss my thoughts on balancing. And if you don't know what this series is because you missed the first video, basically this is a perspective from someone new to the action RPG genre. So like games like Diablo IV, Diablo in general, Last Epoch, and PoE. I've never played Last Epoch. I've played PoE. Don't know what the hell I'm doing there. Probably know less than 10% of what's going on in the game. I started and stopped the game like 6 times, basically, because it was just insanely complex. But I really liked what I was seeing. Anyways, so that's what this is. It's a perspective of someone new to the genre, new to Diablo, and putting my thoughts out there because I'm not an ARPG head. I'm not an OG when it comes to the genre, and I feel like having a fresh perspective on the way things are, is just as important as those who have been around for a long time. Essentially, it comes down to the old guard has their views, they're set in their ways, and a newcomer like myself might bring a new perspective that actually makes sense. I don't fucking know. Maybe I don't make any sense at all, but this video is going to be a little bit shorter than my last one. The last one I kind of went on for a bit. I feel like I could have broken it up into 2 videos, but it is what it is. In this video, I'm going to talk mainly about balancing and a little bit of advice that may help if things stay mostly the same or similar upon release. To summarize what a lot of people have been saying, myself included, the class balance needs to change drastically. The druid is by far the worst class, like 1000%. And barbarian is second to worst. Then you have rogue, sorcerer, and the necromancer, from worst to best in that order. Necromancer probably should be like, I don't even know how to put it, but if you want Diablo IV to be an idle game, basically the necromancer is what you're going to want to pick. So the reason why barbarians and druids are so weak right now, druids especially, one of the main reasons that I found between the two is that their resource regeneration is awful. That is a huge thing that is holding them back. Based on all the information that I've seen, I don't know if anybody's ever really touched on it, but the two classes share that, and they are both doing awful because of that. And if you don't know, the druid and barbarian have to attack enemies to build their resources. The barbarians have fury, and I forget what druids have. It might be like spirit something, I don't know. Basically, you attack enemies, build this up, and your resources are then used when using one of your abilities. So the downside to this is that you will never be at full strength at the beginning of a fight unless you just clear out a mob right before that. And another downside to this is that the basic attacks, especially for the druid, is abysmal as far as damage goes. Let me put it this way. If a sorcerer and a necromancer could clear mobs in under 5 to 7 seconds, like under that, the druid can take 20 seconds. To put that, that's a quarter of the damage. You get what I'm saying? That means if the sorcerer and necromancer are doing 100 damage, the druid's doing 25. It's awful. And the abilities don't do much as far as I can tell. I didn't play druid a bunch. I honestly stopped. It was just terrible. I could not get behind it whatsoever, and I felt like I made a horrible choice even attempting to build a character that was a druid. That's how bad the class is. So I think that is the sticking points between those two, is that their resource regeneration is requiring them to attack enemies. I don't think that's the way to go. If that is something that they need or that they want, they need to allow that. I feel like what Blizzard needs to do, if they really want to make these classes more viable, is that they need the resource regeneration to be ongoing. Like rogues have energy, and they have every second they build up a certain amount of energy. It should be the same thing for the fury, or for the druid and the barbarian. Granted, maybe at a lower rate, at a significant lower rate, but when they do attack enemies, that shit shoots up immensely. The rogues will build energy at a rate of, let's say, 2 to 3 a second, right? Just throwing some random ass numbers out there. The barbarian and the druid should be regenerating at maybe 1 per second, but when they hit, they gain 10 to 15 resource per hit, and when they use their abilities, it should still it should capitalize on that hit and give them even more resources. Now I didn't play a lot, so I wasn't paying attention to this part of it to see if that is the case. If it's not, it should be. I feel like that it's an obvious, yeah, it does, but I don't know. Who fucking knows? I'm not the developers. So all that said, when it comes to hardcore mode, you don't ever want to play rogue, or you don't ever want to play druid or barbarian, and maybe not even rogue. I was playing rogue the entire time. I did play necromancer, and that's why I said necromancer completely fucking broken idle game status. I got bored of it. It was fun initially to be like blowing through everything, but I got incredibly bored. I was like, all right, just walk around, click, walk around, click, click, click. I didn't feel like I was doing shit, you know, which I get. A lot of people would love that. They just want to sit back and be like, yes, do my bidding, minions. I get it, but that's not for me. As far as hardcore mode, this is where I'm gonna come in with what I think is a great way to go if you really want to play a different class. If you don't know, in hardcore mode, you lose your character completely. Unlike Path of Exile, where if you die, you are demoted to standard, right? I think that's still a thing, or is a thing. I may be confusing some shit, but if I remember correctly, in Path of Exile, you start in hardcore mode, but then if you die, you get demoted to the standard mode, or softcore, if you will. That doesn't exist in Diablo, so arguably it's a much harsher hardcore experience, which is interesting considering Diablo is geared more towards the masses and a more casual player base, but the hardcore mode is like actually really punishing. That said, you lose your character entirely. You cannot play that character again in any way, shape, or form unless you build someone who looks and find the items to match whatever it is that you were going for. Don't play druid, don't play barbarian, and I would say don't even play rogue in hardcore mode, because I was playing rogue almost the entire time during the betas, and I went hardcore mode, trying new builds, trying, you know, new core skills, basic skills, like just adjusting things here and there. Even with the rogue, their damage is good, but it's not good enough at the start, and 2, they have to be up in the face of everything almost 100% of the time for the skills that actually do consistently more damage and better damage. That, with how squishy they are, it is a very difficult class to play, which makes sense, but it's almost so difficult in hardcore mode that it is not viable. It's like on the line. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you're gonna go straight into hardcore with rogue, avoid events to start, avoid just any extra shit. Just stick to the side quest, stick to the story campaign, just stick to that. The events are very risky in most instances, even as a rogue. As far as sorcerer and necromancer go, there's no problem. Now, the reason why I say don't start off with those 3 classes is because you share items with your other classes in the game, and buffs from the altars of Lilith in the game. You start off with the sorcerer, you start off with the necromancer. I would say just go necromancer. Just fucking do it. Grind items, you know, grind the altar of Lilith, get all that shit to buff up and set your new characters up with these buffs and items at the start, so that way your survivability and strength is much greater when you do decide to play the actual playstyle that you want. So you could go as a necro, obliterate everything in your path, get all the special loot that drops from events or whatever. If it's for a rogue, if it's for a druid or a barbarian, set that shit to the side in your stash, and then as you get the altars of Lilith and so on and so forth, when you start your new character as a barbarian or rogue, I'm not gonna say a druid because just don't even bother. Unless you desperately want to play a druid, you better grind the hell out of the game as a necromancer before you even attempt druid in the current state, if it stays this way, because druids is just no, you know, get legendaries, get rares for those other classes, get the altars of Lilith, so when you start, you're fully buffed up, ready to go. I just wanted to get in really quick, talk about the balance, which needs a severe overhaul, an overhaul, and just do it that way. If the balance isn't adjusted to make those other classes stronger, especially with the scaling, because you got to take into account the enemy scale with you in the current state of the game, so you're always going to feel a little bit weaker, which is why you want to set your other characters and classes up for success. I don't know if this is something that people have touched on or thought about, but essentially you want to treat it as the league starter for PoE, where you go in, build up your character, and at the end game, you respec and do all that, and then you have your end game build. That's kind of how you want to treat Diablo when the game releases, if the balance is mostly the same. If you really want to play a druid, or you really want to play a barbarian, and maybe even the rogue, start with the necromancer, start with the sorcerer, get all the shit that you need, and then get your end game class, the class you really want to play, get them set up for success, so that way it just makes everything smoother. You have a much higher chance of success, survivability, all that. Hopefully this video helped. Like I said, just wanted to keep it a little bit shorter. Essentially, necromancer equals idle game, sorcerer is strong, other 3 classes don't bother in hardcore to start off with. Grind it up with the first 2, and then you're set. Yeah, other than that, that's it. Toodles.